Okay, so let's be honest. If you drive a vehicle in any of the northern states in the United States, you're going to end up dealing with salt corrosion, rust, and inevitably frame repair if you're an independent worker like myself. So on these Ford Rangers, there's a couple of spots that are very common in order to rust out, and I'll give you a show around on this one and point out the locations that I'm aware of after having 5 or 6 of these. So let's get started. The first major spot that you can end up having issues is right in here where these bolts go through on the control arm. As you can see, if you look at this one, it's already had a plate welded and into place. It's because right here where the divot is that the bolt goes in, it accumulates stuff and it rusts out in between. On the back side, if we come around, you'll see that the same exact divot exists. If you place a big giant washer in there, you can weld the washer into place in order to be able to alleviate some of that. But eventually all of this will have to be cut out and re-welded. The next place as we come back is over here on the passenger side. You've got where both of your exhaust pipes come down and they accumulate. And right here, on that section of frame rail there's oftentimes a rust pocket that'll end up coming out because of the condensation from the heat. So if we take a plate like this, we can cut it out and we can weld it up in there. It is really tight and you're going to need a MIG welder to be able to do it. So we're going to plate that. The next place that you're going to find most of the time that it ends up having a rod out, depending on how and where it's parked, is occasionally this spot right here. There's a hole up here that water tends to shoot into on a regular basis and rust out right in here. This one's ironically pretty solid. As we come back through, what we're going to find next is going to be right here next to this gas tank. You're going to have a spot right here, especially on the 90s style ones. This little spot here, the gas tank is actually up against the frame rail instead of spaced away like it is in the 2000s. And that up against the frame rail area, this whole plate, oftentimes about a foot section will be rusted out and needs to be replaced. On these 2000s, what they ended up doing was making a bolt together frame rail back here. And if I can catch the light just right in here, that gets really soft, and that little white dot there showing up, if you watch, that is sunlight coming through. This little plate right here where it goes together, this ends up accumulating rust and it eats out right there. You can see the white light coming straight through it right there. So then, as we come back over here, the other thing that we're going to notice is going to be this mount here. But it's usually not this one that rusts out. It's usually the one that is further back, right in here. This one is the one that usually rusts out. What you can see is what I've done is I've created a strap that comes down with a notch in it, and I spaced it away from the frame enough that I can get the gas tank strap in there. And that way I didn't have to replace the entire rail. I just cleaned up and reinforced the upper section. On the other side over here, you're going to have the spot up next to where the factory exhaust is. So here's my exhaust, and you're going to have that spot right there in that section of frame rail. And yet again, it's because of the condensation that happens because of the exhaust system. So don't be surprised if this here is all crack rusted and gnarly and undoable. Yet again, just make sure your top is intact and weld a plate up there if necessary to reinforce. The next place as we turn around, so we've got our axle here, and what we're going to look at is, if I come around here, there's going to be a brake mount right here where the brake cable is. This section over the top of the bump stop tends to accumulate stuff because of that mount for the brake cable, and this will sometimes be rusted out in this area. Make sure to check that. If you have a spare tire mount at all, then consider yourself lucky. But basically, from right here back, that spare tire mount is always rusted out. Just immediately chop it off and call it good. And then last but not least, we have the rear section of frame. As you can see, I've already put this one in and plated it. They actually make a kit that you can buy for doing this that cuts all the way back to about in here so that you can butt weld it on. I prefer to try and go right in between the two sets of bolts so that I've got both a mechanical and a welded hold. And if we spin around, we'll see that we've got the same thing on the other side. So there we are. That's what we're dealing with right now for rust repair to go and get done. And then we're going to start painting. What was that pose? Do it again. Come on, do the cutie little pose. Yeah, Jessie's a down and dirty chick. She's not one that likes to do the cutesy stuff. Although, ironically, she sells nails. Oh, okay. So there we go. We got that torn down as far as what's coming off of it, except for we're going to take this back railing off and we're going to take the aux light off most likely and leave the tail lights and just grind around them and cover and paint. But we got to get the whole frame done and the hole in the frame that's over there. Oh, there we go. That's what the flatbed looks like after getting torn down and sanded about every 2 to 3 years here in Maine winter. It survives good as long as you take the time to go back through and clean it every 2 or 3 years. But that's what we're doing today. So I really enjoy these little tiny Chicago electrics that you can pick up at Harbor Freight because they're throwaway. You just don't care if you drop it, you bang it or whatever. And the brushes actually fit on the inside edge of the guard because they're so atrociously out of proportion to the grinder. But we've got this cleaned up. And we got a little bit more to finish, but we're getting closer. Can you do the other end too? Before I go any further, I wanted to talk about the fact that my tools are nothing but just the average Joe type tools. This is a cordless skill grinder that I really love. It's a brushless. Skill was really brilliant in making sure that there's actually a filter so it doesn't die like a lot of other grinders do from pulling in their own carnage. This is their brushed grinder. It's lighter than their brushless, so I like being able to throw it around one-handed. And as you can see, it works with the 2-amp battery, and it works with the giant 5-amp battery. The charge time on these is like 20 minutes. It's insane how quick these things can recharge. Basic grinding and stuff with this, with a 5-amp battery, it will go for almost an hour and a half of just basic grinding and sanding and everything else. You really get some bang for your buck. This is just a regular Skill cordless reciprocating saw with a Diablo blade on it. And this here is just a regular Skill drill with a bit on it for getting up in and grinding out where I will have a hard time reaching later. So now we've got this plate and we've got our hole here, and that plate is going to go right like that, and we're going to clamp it and weld it in place. See you on the flip side with my $200 Fournet welder. Well, I got about 1.5 years out of that one. As you can see, that bristle brush really isn't that old, but it really takes a toll on these grinders and stuff. That's why it is I use the throwaway cheapos for doing bristle brush work. So I guess we're going to need to order up a new grinder in order to replace that one. For now, I'll throw this over onto another grinder that I have and go from there. But yeah, bristle brushes tend to go and eat up grinders, so keep them on the cheapies if you can. Oh, there we go. A little bit of this Rust-Oleum high performance enamel, and we'll call it good. There we are. So there's my weld, there's the factory weld right there, and there's my weld right there, plating it in. That should work. So this is my trick to doing the frames. This is TotalBoat. I'll post a link down below. And basically you grab one of these and you fill it up with this rust primer stuff. And so up here you can see what the frame rail looks like previous to it. And this is the frame rail with just TotalBoat on it for about 15 minutes. Now this stuff is caustic. This stuff is definitely something you do not want to inhale. I'm not usually one to give warnings, but do not use this unless you have a well ventilated area, and anything it gets on will immediately start acid burning on your skin. It doesn't seem to eat the plastic out of these, but you will know if you get it on your skin. So plan ahead to be able to take a shower and wash it off. If you get any on you, especially if you're spraying in underneath, it's going to mist on you, and it does not feel good. If you're looking for some massively scientific formula for mixing this or something like that, you're not going to find one right now. Basically, I just use a siphon feed gun. Nothing too crazy. You can pick them up just about anywhere. And I mix it about as close to 50-50 as I can get on a mix. It is nothing more than just good old-fashioned black Rust-Oleum paint mixed with acetone. There's nothing special about it. It's literally just acetone and black paint. Right now I've got the mix a little bit too much acetone. So we're going to throw some Rust-Oleum in. And you'll know when it's too much acetone because you'll see the spray look kind of a clearish color. If you've got too much Rust-Oleum in it, it'll shoot like tar and the tip will start to clog. But if you get it about 50-50 or maybe about 60% Rust-Oleum, it'll usually shoot pretty good. There we go. And you got to move and keep moving quick because once the Rust-Oleum gets in the tip of the gun, it starts to clog up really, really quick and easily. So let's go. I'm sure somebody's going to say something about the goggles being up here instead of over my glasses. I keep them up here so that I don't get dripped down through the upper part of my eye. I'm not worried about whether I get splashed this way. It's coming through the top because this is pure acetone and it'll burn like hell if it gets in there. Well, it's the next morning and we took the plastic off. We've got the side skirts doing well. Here's all the coating and everything here. Still need to go and get the rear light put back on and we're going to center it. And should be good to go. That fender needs to be done, but we're good enough to pass a main inspection right now, so we're not going to worry too much about it. On a side note, these ended up getting sprayed down with a bunch of the rust converter spray. Luckily, it seems to have not etched or eaten into the paint too badly. They should still be able to be cleaned up. For this kind of thing, I just use this really cheap super clean stuff. It's at almost all the auto parts place. It's basically knockoff orange. But we should be able to get back to these soon. As you can see, the speckles on the tire. There we go. Well, it's not perfect, but it's back together. So there's a couple of imperfections where I ended up having some quibbles. Basically, I didn't quite give the rust preventer enough time to fully dry in certain sections. So I'm going to have to redo those later. But we've got the light bar back on. We've got that lined up where it ought to be now. And we've got our crane back on. The whole underside is all nice and black now. And we should be good to go. I ended up with an area here that didn't quite seal as well as I would like, but it looks good from 10 feet away, so I'll take it. And this fender here is just plain shot. I need to just plain replace that entire fender, so I didn't even bother trying to go and do anything to it. We're gonna hope we get past our inspection and then call it good.